Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023 at 3 o'clock p.m. And that means it's time for Women in Business. One warning today. My internet is being funky. I don't know why, but it's deciding to kind of fade in and out a little bit. I'm not sure what's up with that. There's no reason for it of which I am aware, but it's doing that. So I apologize if the quality is a bit uneven here. Things happen. You do what you do. So today we are talking about trust. And basically, this is let's go on a therapy session with Christine because trust is something that I'm going to admit I struggle with a lot. And I had something happen over the weekend that really kind of put my trust issues in the spotlight again, shall we say. And even though multiple people have assured me that what happened had nothing to do with me specifically, it feels like it did. And any of you who are in the Women in Garment Decoration group, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna rehash it here. But something happened that I felt was a betrayal of trust. And I had to kind of wrap my head around a couple of things. Number one, what happened probably had nothing to do with me specifically. And number two, oh, look, my trust issues are like massively in the spotlight for me personally again. So I thought, you know what? Let's talk about this subject for that reason. And also because trust can be a tough thing for a lot of women. I mean, being a woman out in the world, having to worry about getting your drink drugged if you're at the bar, having to worry about being sexually assaulted or, beaten up or all sorts of things. And yes, I understand that these are not specifically women's issues, but they are mostly women's issues. So, somebody I think it was Pink I watched an interview that she did and she said, having a vagina these days is basically you have to have a lot of trust because holy crap, there's a lot of stuff going on. And that also made me think about, maybe we need to talk about this a little bit. And that's why the name of the show is Trust, Getting It, Keeping It, and Believing It. Because those kind of are getting it and keeping it are sort of the same thing. What you do to get someone to trust you is also probably the same things that you're going to have to do to keep that trust. And believing that trust is a viable thing and that you can trust people is a little different animal. So we're going to talk about getting trust and keeping trust kind of in the same package. And then we'll talk a little bit about if you have trust issues, how do you overcome them? Which, like I said, not claiming to be an expert, did a lot of reading and research for this show and have done a lot of reading and research in the past and some therapy. But I don't claim to be an expert when it comes to trust. I need to be better at it than I am. I'm aware of that. So everything I'm saying here is stuff that I've picked up over the years of therapy, from research, from my own experiences. I don't claim to be an expert. So I just want you to all be clear on that, I'm not putting myself in the shoes of someone who knows everything about this topic. It's just a discussion. Because honestly, this is something that cropped up in my life and it was something that I felt like discussing. So the first thing that I found out, which I did not know, is that there is actually a name for having trust issues. Pistanthrophobia is what I'm going to say. I have no idea if that's right, but pistanthrophobia seems right to me. And that is actually what it's called when you have trust issues. It's not considered a mental illness. It's not really a medical diagnosis. It's just the term. But when I found that, I was like, okay, there's enough people who have these issues that there's actually a medical, so to speak, term for it. And I thought that was interesting. Now, I mean, probably not a huge surprise that there are people out there with trust issues more than just me. I didn't think I was the only one, but the fact that it was actually given uh, a Latin name or a medical name, I thought was interesting. And I do want to say, good afternoon, Cindy. Thank you for always being here. You are such a stalwart supporter of this show, and I so appreciate it. And Wendy, always lovely to see you. And Wendy says, I always say I am jaded by experience. Oh, me too, Wendy. Me too. I get that. But let's talk about how you get trust and how you keep trust. And I wanted to start with getting and keeping because I think, like I said, I think they're different things. I think that getting and keeping trust is a separate issue than trusting someone. So I wanted to kind of examine them as two separate things. So this is no surprise. The first way to get people to trust you or to keep someone's trust is to be honest. And I will say this, for me, honesty is probably one of the biggest things that I require of people in my life for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've been lied to a lot. And there's nothing worse than finding out that someone that you trusted lied to you. It's just a total betrayal of everything. And whether they lied by omission or they directly lied to you verbally, it's a horrible feeling. And the other thing is, if you're someone like me, or if you're someone who has had to develop your sense of how to read people, if you are very intuitive, I'm quite sensitive and I'm pretty good at reading people, and I can tell when somebody's lying to me. I can tell when they tell me they like me and they don't. I can tell when they say that they want to be with me and they don't. I can tell. So I've always said and I've always meant, I would much rather you just look at me and say, "You know what? I don't like you. I don't want to do this. I don't think you're funny. I don't want to watch your show," whatever it is. I would much rather have that than somebody feeding me a bunch of nice things that they think I want to hear. I don't trust that because usually I can tell they're not being sincere. And now, not always. There have been some instances where it hasn't happened, sadly. But I think honesty is like the bedrock of trust. I need to know that you're being real. I need to know that you're being honest. I think if you want someone to trust you, you have to be real about how you interact with them. Yes. And Wendy says, my personal terms, they are blowing smoke completely. And the thing is, if you have somebody blowing smoke at you, most of the time you can bat it out of the way and realize that they're trying to obscure whatever it is that they're really feeling or thinking or wanting. And I don't need people around me. And I think most people would feel this way. We don't need people around us who don't want to be there. We don't need people around us who don't have the same goals or values that we do, for the most part. We don't need people around us who maybe don't respect us or think that we're worth their time, but they're there for whatever the reason. We don't need that. So just be honest. And honestly, honestly, that makes me laugh, but when I started working on that and actually speaking my feelings and telling people what I really felt and needed, some people disappeared from my life. I'm not going to lie. But the people that disappeared from my life were people who weren't treating me that well anyway, who didn't really care about my wants and needs. And I knew that. And people, honestly, who hadn't been particularly trustworthy in the past. So I think if you want to develop a trust in any relationship, whether it's with your child or it's with your coworkers, it's with your friends, it's with your significant other, be honest with them. If you don't want to go, tell them you don't want to go. If you don't like that thing, tell them you don't like that thing. If you're still up in the air about whether or not this relationship is serious, be honest. At least if you get honest input, then you can make a decision that's based on reality. And maybe if somebody tells you, you know what, I like you, but I'm not ready to say this is the be all end all relationship, then you can go, well, I am. And if you're not, then maybe we need to not have a relationship anymore. That's sad, but at least you can move on and find someone who wants what you want. So, and don't get me wrong, I know honesty is not always easy, particularly when you're saying something that you think could hurt someone or something that you know will be contrary to what somebody wants you to say. I get that. Totally get it. But I still think it's the best policy. Next one. This is another huge one for me. Honor your commitments. If you say you're going to pick somebody up at the airport, pick them up at the airport. If you say that you'll lend somebody money, lend them the money. If you say that you'll be at their show or you'll read their manuscript or you'll come to their workshop or whatever it is, or you'll buy a product from their website, whatever it is, do that. And keep in mind that not all commitments are spoken. There are commitments that parents make to children, that partners make to partners, that spouses make to spouses, whatever it is. There are unspoken commitments and cultural commitments that kind of come as part and parcel of relationships that we have. And those commitments aren't always something, when parents have kids, nobody looks at them and says, you're committing to love this kid. Nobody says that to you. That's just understood. And when, as the kid, you realize that, oh, I'm not feeling that, or maybe they don't like me as much as they're telling me they do, or, maybe they like the idea of me, but not the person, or whatever it is. Or, I'm in this relationship and this other person says they're all in, but every time I ask them for something, they aren't there. And what happens over time if people don't keep their commitments is you start not trusting them. You start thinking, well, last time they weren't there. And some people will walk into this a million times and they'll make a million excuses. Well, he said he'd pick me up at the airport, but he got busy and I got a taxi and it was fine. And the question then becomes, how many times do you say that before you say there's a bigger problem here? And that's something that I honestly still don't have the balance for. I tend to be a little trigger happy on some of this stuff, and I will admit it. If you make a commitment to me and you don't live up to it, you probably aren't going to get a second chance. That's my damage. I am fully aware of it. I own it. But I'm just saying that's how it is with me. But it also makes me very, very aware of when I make a commitment, following through. If I say we're doing a video call at 3 p.m., I will be there at 5:02 because I want to make sure that I'm there and I'm ready to go, and that's going to happen. If I say I'm going to come to your show or I'm going to read your book or I'm going to do whatever, I will do it. And I try to be really aware of that. So I don't promise things that I either don't want to do or aren't able to do for whatever the reason. It's a little due diligence, I think, that we each have to do. And I think sometimes we make commitments because we feel like we should. We feel guilted into it. We feel like it's required of us because of whatever the relationship is. We feel like it's required of us to be nice or to be good people or whatever it is. And I think we need to be more aware of the commitments we're making, because every time you don't fulfill a commitment, you're really breaking the bond of trust with whoever else is involved in that particular event or activity. So it's something to really think about. Next thing. Oh, this one is so hard for me. I am so not good at it. I am just like really, really not good at being vulnerable. It is not something I do well at all. I will go to almost any lengths to avoid it. But part of trusting people is revealing your inner self and revealing things that potentially could be used to hurt you, or giving them a space in your life and counting on them to do certain things for you, to be there for you in rough moments, all that kind of stuff. It's really, if you're someone who's been burned in those kind of situations, it can be really, really hard to let your shields down, to let your to I mean, it's the only word that fits, to be vulnerable, to say I'm hurt, I'm scared, I'm needy, I need help, and I'm trusting that you're going to respond to that in the way that I need you to respond to that. That's scary as all heck. And I like this comment from Wendy. I'm going to share this here. Oh, and the making excuses for those who don't respect you or your time. Not just social or family for me. I used to do this for clients too. Then on the other side, and I look back and I kick myself for not seeing it. And then she also said, I question you're vulnerable. Look at this topic and how you were sharing about your experience. Yes and no, because this is a very controlled situation. I'm sitting here talking into a camera. There could be 20 people out there. There could be a million people out there listening. There could be nobody. There could be one person. So, and honestly, this is talking about my past experiences and talking about what I have gone through and what I've learned from it doesn't feel vulnerable to me, because honestly, I don't really care what anybody thinks about it, and I'm not really expecting anybody to do anything about it. It's just out there, and you can like it or not like it, and it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. Um So thank you for that, and I appreciate that, but I don't really know if this qualifies. I'd like to give myself a pat on the back and say, "Yes, it does," but I'm really not sure. But I will say being vulnerable is probably one of the scariest things and probably one of the most necessary things if you want to form anything other than a surface relationship, and especially if you want to form a relationship in which there's trust. You have to be willing to expose your soft underbelly, so to speak, to touch on the things that scare you or make you sad or make you angry. You have to trust that you can express all that to somebody else and they're going to take it in the spirit in which it was meant. Not an easy thing to do. Not something that I have mastered in any sense of the word. I wish that I could say that I had, but haven't yet. So, something I have to keep working on. Next thing, if you're building trust, you have to be willing to give and receive. And there's the two words here that I really want to focus on are give and receive. Because a lot of times, particularly if you were trained to be a caregiver, or you're a people pleaser, or you're someone who was always valued for what you gave to others, you may just give and give and give and give and give. And even though part of you will be going, "Ah, I feel like I'm always giving and I'm never getting anything back," you just kind of accept that that's how it's going to be. And if you are one of those people or have had life experiences that taught you that that's how it works, you give and you never get anything back, it can be really hard to ask for what you need, and it can be really hard to receive that because you don't trust that anybody's going to give it to you. So you have to develop a trusting relationship, you have to be willing to be both the giver and you have to be willing to be the receiver. And to be the receiver, you have to ask for what you want. And if you are not someone who is trusting, if you're not someone who has had good experiences with trusting people, then asking for what you want can feel like standing on a tightrope over the Grand Canyon. Because if your experiences say it has been saying, I need this, and totally not getting it, or being ridiculed for asking for it, or being told that you don't deserve it, then circling back to the vulnerability thing, asking for what you need is hugely vulnerable. And again, it's one of those things where you have to learn. You have to learn to maybe start small with something little, and then hopefully over time, the relationship will grow and you'll feel more comfortable asking for more. And I like this comment from Cindy. I think it is easier to trust people that run in the same circles. When I met you for the first time, I was not worried about trust. You can just feel the character of a person. Yes and no. I think having a knowledge of someone from seeing them and interacting with them on social media or something like that can give you an insight into who the person is maybe or how they operate. Um, I don't know your history, so I don't know what you're dealing with in terms of, issues. Um, I think it's a little different for everybody. I tend not to trust anybody. I mean, I like people and I value people and I'm glad that there are people in my life, but I'm very guarded most of the time. And there's a pretty thick wall and a pretty big moat, and there might be alligators in the moat. And there's a lot that I don't reveal. And I think people mistake the fact that I talk about a lot of the stuff that I talk about for, look, and I am being open and I am being transparent in all that stuff. But I don't expect I guess maybe that's the difference. I don't expect anything from anyone when I tell you this stuff. I'm not expecting you to feel bad for me. I'm not expecting you to want to help me. I'm not expecting anything other than that you listen and hopefully maybe take something away. But and yes, you have met the people that will come up to you and you know they are so fake. Yeah. And and you meet people who definitely have an agenda for whatever they want something. Yeah, totally. But circling back to the point I was talking about, and I think this is another thing, you meet people who are looking to take. Which is really another word for fake. They're looking at, what can I get out of this relationship? They're not looking for a reciprocal relationship. They're not looking for even really a relationship at all. They're looking for, what can I get out of this situation? How can you help me? What can you do for me? Whatever it is. So that's another thing to really be aware of. If you get that vibe from somebody, and if that's what they demonstrate as the relationship progresses, then this is probably somebody that you're never going to build a trust relationship with, because it will never be reciprocal. Because it's all about what they can extract from the relationship, not what they can give to the relationship. So this is a huge thing for trust. And I think this is a really good signal as to whether or not you can trust someone. Is, are they as willing to give as they are to receive? Or is it always going one way? And please keep in mind, this is not going to always be a 50-50 split. There are times when one person's going to need to lean on the other. There is times when one person is going to need more than the other. There is times when one person isn't going to be able to give as much. That's how relationships work. But it should, over the aggregate, balance out. It should balance out. If it doesn't, then you may want to look at that relationship and decide whether it's a trustworthy one. Next thing, this is another one for me because I grew up not having really anything about me respected, honestly. And there is nothing worse than somebody not respecting your thoughts, not respecting your values, not respecting your feelings. That's okay, there are worse things, but it really can be toxic. If you have somebody, it's like if you say, I don't like that restaurant, and the person you're with keeps saying, oh, well, it's really a good restaurant. You should try it again. And you try it again, and you say, you know what? I really don't like that restaurant. And you keep getting told, it's a good restaurant. Everybody likes that restaurant. Why don't you like that restaurant? What's wrong with you? Why do you always have to go against what everybody else wants to do? And they're basically saying your opinion doesn't matter. Or if you get angry and the person that you're angry at tries to jolly you out of it by, being silly or using a silly voice or, poo-pooing whatever you're saying or telling you that you're dramatic or whatever it is. No, you have a right to feel what you feel. You have a right to think what you think. People who are in trusting relationships can express their feelings and their preferences and have those things respected. It's the same thing with what Wendy was saying earlier, people who don't respect your time. If you are in a relationship or you're dealing with a client or whatever it is who never answers your questions, who's always late, who says they're going to do something and then doesn't do it, they're not being respectful. So in those cases, you may need to just go find new people to deal with. And I get that's not always as easy as you would like it to be. I understand that. But I think it's a little alarm bell that, hey, maybe this relationship is not what I want it to be. And maybe this is something that I need to look at and decide if it's something that I want to continue further. And yes, there are reasons for these things sometimes. And that's the line you have to walk is there a rational, reasonable explanation for this? Is it a pattern that keeps recurring? All that kind of stuff. And it's building trusting relationships are a lot of work. A lot of work. And Cindy brings up a good point. I think things have changed so much now that we have social media. I have so many great good friends that I only know through social media. And here's my caveat on that. I know a lot of people through social media too. And for the most part, when I have met those people that I met through social media in person, they have, in general, turned out to be the same sort of people that they were on social media. And that's lovely. There have been a few and honestly, if I'm being honest, oh, I hate it when I have to say these things. I kind of had an inkling when I was dealing with certain people on social media that, oh, maybe I wouldn't like this person in real life, or maybe that's not a person I should count on. And then I met some of them in real life and I went, yep, that's not. So yes, I think as Cindy says, I will probably never meet them in person, but I know that I can call or text them and they would help if needed. And yeah, I think you can form those kind of relationships on social media. I don't think every relationship on social media is like that. And I think you need to be cautious. But I don't think you should not trust every relationship that forms on social media. I think it needs to build over time. But yes, I will agree with you, Cindy. I have people on social media that are relationships that formed on social media that I know if I was really in trouble, I could talk to them and they would help. So it can happen. But I do think you need to be aware of the fact that not everyone in real life or on social media is who they're claiming to be. And so you need to be a little wary. And if that makes me sound like there's a wall and a moat with alligators. Well, what can I say? There is. And and yes, Sydney, you make a good point. It depends on the groups you run in. This is something I had to learn. It depends on the people. And if you have been in situations where the people around you treated you badly, that may become what you think what you think your life should be like, how you think you should be treated. So you have to unlearn some of that, and you have to unlearn an attraction to those type of people. Hard to do sometimes. I mean, really hard to do sometimes. But I think it does depend on the people you pick. It does depend on the people you interact with. I think that's totally true. So something to be aware of. And Cindy just commented about stalkers too. And I think that's another thing, particularly if you're female. You need to be aware of anybody that's making you uncomfortable or making you feel like you're not safe, because that's a thing too. So what I want to do now is circle to the other side of this, which is if you are like me and you have trust issues and you're really reluctant to trust, or you feel very uncomfortable about that, here's some things you can do that can help you take steps toward learning to trust again. And this is a process. It's not something where you just go, I'm going to trust people now, and then you do. Even if you said that every day, I think there's behaviors you have to unlearn. There's things you have to unpack to figure out how to trust people again. It's not as simple as saying, I want to be more trusting. It would be nice if it were, but it's not always that way. So the first thing, take safe risks. Start trusting people for small things. Things that don't have high stakes. Something like, hey, would you bring me lunch? Or, can you pick me up at the airport? Or something that if it doesn't happen, if it goes wrong, it's not huge. You can manage things. Trust people with a little bit of your story, not all of your story, but something that makes you feel a little bit vulnerable, but that's not a huge deal. And it's kind of like testing the water a little bit. It's kind of like saying, I think that, you could be significant in my life, or I think that we could have a good relationship, whatever that relationship is. But I need to do a little test first to decide if that's really true. And so I'm going to trust you for some small things, or with some small bits of information, or with some small tasks, or whatever it is. And this will give me some data to decide whether I can trust you or not. And I think if you're talking about people that you meet online, on social media, same thing. How transparent are they? How much of their story checks out? How much do you know about them? When they say things online, are they consistent with the story they've told before? How much are they showing you? How confident are you that the person that you're seeing in their profile is the person they really are? So take safe risks. And the other thing I will say about this point is trust your gut on this. But don't let your fear of being hurt or being betrayed keep you from trusting people. So if your gut tells you there's something wrong here, there's something weird here, this person makes me feel, uncomfortable, then you need to listen to those feelings. But don't seize every little thing that happens as an excuse to say, well, I knew it, this person isn't trustworthy. And it's really, really kind of seductive to do that a little bit if you're someone with trust issues, because you want an out in a way, because trusting people is scary. And it's vulnerable, and it's if you're somebody who's been burned with trust issues before, then it's really scary to do. So it's easier to I call it my "I'll leave you before you leave me" syndrome because amongst the issues that I have, there's some abandonment issues. And over the years, I have kind of developed the "I'll leave you before you leave me" thing. So if I think someone is not interested or is getting ready to end a relationship, or I just think, I don't know, I just get a vibe or something. I'm like, I'm out and I'm gone. And I hate that I do that. I know that I've ended some relationships badly because of that. I know that I've ended some relationships that probably could have continued and been good ones because I was scared. I get that. I totally get that. But it's I want the escape hatch. I want the parachute. I want to be able to get out when I feel nervous or scared or like I'm going to be left. And that's one of the things where I can take safe risks is when that feeling happens, tell the person that I'm feeling that about and say, "You know what? This thing happened and it's making me feel like you don't want to be my friend anymore, or you don't want to be in this relationship anymore, or you're going to stop working with me, or whatever it is. And I need you to know that. And I need you to be honest with me about what the status of things is." That's hugely vulnerable, but it could be really beneficial. And it's also a fairly safe risk because if I was going to run anyway, if they tell me, "Yeah, you're right, I kind of was looking for an out," then I can go. But maybe they tell me, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Here's these 3 things that were going on that you didn't know about that were causing me to do what I did." And then maybe the relationship stays a relationship. So, and granted, this is easier said than done. I get it. Trust me, I get it so much. Oh, Cindy, you make me laugh. Cindy says, "Okay, you caught me. When I take photos of food in my kitchen, I try to do it in a clean part of the kitchen. I know this is a serious topic, but I want you to be happy and have fun in life." Cindy, I'm just scandalized and I don't know what to say, but I think I'll get over it. Um and I want me to be happy and have fun in my life too, and that's why I discuss the things that I discuss because that's part of being happy and having fun in my life is having good relationships. And this is how you do that. Next way, communicate. Oh, say what you feel, say what you think, say what you want, talk. And this is a big thing that I think trips up a lot of people. We make assumptions about why other people are doing what they're doing. We make assumptions about what other people want. We make assumptions about what other people think about us. And we act on those instead of saying, "What do you need? What happened today that made you cranky? How is our relationship going? What could I do that would make things better? What do you think about me? Here's what I think about you." You know, communicate. And also, honestly, just if you have trust issues, let the people that you're dealing with know that. And it doesn't have to be a big long, "Here's the 49 things that happened that made me have issues." It's just, "I need you to know this. I have trust issues in this area because I've had bad experiences before, and I'm working on this behavior, but I need you to call me on it if you see me doing certain things, and here's the things." Again, vulnerable, not always comfortable, but it gives you an even playing field. And it also lets the other person in the relationship understand why you do what you do sometimes. And if you understand it, now if it's always an excuse, I'm sorry, I can't go on a date with you because I have trust issues. I'm sorry, I can't join this team because I have trust issues. If it's always an excuse, then you have a problem. But if it's just, this is something I'm working on, I know it tends to impact me in these ways. I wanted to let you know so you would be aware. Simple. And hopefully effective. And yes, Cindy makes a good point. That goes back to not knowing if someone had a bad day and reacted in a different way. And there's that too. If you have trust issues, you will tend to jump to the worst conclusion possible. Your significant other comes into the room and they're grumpy, and you think they hate me and they're leaving me. And really, they're grumpy because they spilled coffee on themselves, and their coworker, who was really annoying, made fish in the break room at lunch, and the office smelled like fish all day. And it has nothing to do with you. You might have been the best part of their day. But if you don't communicate those things, if you don't say to them, hey, you seem like you had a bad day, what happened? Then you assume, because you have trust issues, that it's all about you and they're going to leave you and your perfect life is going to be over. And so you're going to leave them first. And pretty soon, spilled coffee and fish in the lunchroom have become, that's it, we're over. So Cindy's totally right there. You can't assume. You can't assume why people are doing what they're doing. You have to ask. Now, if they're not willing to communicate with you, then that may be a sign that, okay, this is a relationship that has run its course. But you need to ask. And I understand if you have, because I have this myself. If you have trust issues, asking somebody else why they're doing what they're doing is really, really hard, because you may have had experiences where you asked that and the answer you got was not comfortable, or the way you were treated was not comfortable. But you still have to take the risk anyway. Small risk, but you still have to take it. Next thing. Oh, I hate this one. I totally hate this one. I can't lie. Accept that there will be risk. Accept that you're going to risk your heart or your feelings or your happiness or whatever it is. Accept that's going to happen. It's hard to do. For years and years, especially after I had my dark year, I structured my life with as little risk as possible, because I had crashed to the bottom so hard and so spectacularly. And I was really afraid that if I did it again, I wouldn't survive it, is honestly, because I barely survived it as it was. And I had a relationship, or I had a life that was very narrow and very circumscribed and what I called serene, but really boring. And I didn't want risk, and I didn't want anything to happen. I just wanted it to be basically flatlined, which isn't much of a life, honestly, and isn't much fun and isn't very exciting and doesn't really bring you a lot of good experiences. You don't have the highs, but you don't have the lows either. So and I'll be honest, I'm still working on accepting risk. I'm still not great at it. I'm better than I was, but I'm still not great at it. So it's a tough one. It really is a tough one to accept that risk will happen and you have to make your peace with it, and that sometimes you will take a risk and it's not going to work out. But that doesn't mean that you were wrong for taking the risk. It just means that one didn't work out. Still something I'm learning. This one, big one. Get to the root of your trust issues. Seems self-explanatory, but a lot of people never do the work. And that's therapy. That's being sad. That may be journaling. That may be confronting the people that you have issues with. It could be any number of things. In my case, it's been a lot of writing, a lot of journaling. It's been some therapy. It's just been thinking about things. It's been a lot of reading and research. to try to figure out, okay, where did these things come from? And really, how it starts is you start noticing patterns. Like, it took me, sadly, much longer than it should have to notice my pattern of, if you're going to leave me, I'm going to leave you first. Took me quite a while to figure out that was happening. And when it did happen, I went, okay, why is this happening? And then I started tracing it back through various things in my life. And I was like, okay, now I understand it. So there's the root of it. Now I have to dig that root out and get rid of it so that I can behave in a different way. Not easy, not always fun. I have had my share of sitting in a therapist's office and blowing through their entire box of tissues. It happens. You also have to take responsibility for what you've done. Sometimes your trust issues were coping mechanisms that don't need to be there anymore. Sometimes your trust issues are, like I said, it's a wall with a moat and alligators, and at one time, that was warranted. Maybe it's not anymore. So you have to get the sledgehammer and knock down the wall, and you have to drain the moat, and you have to make the alligators into purses. You have to do that. Nobody else can do that for you. And yes, that's vulnerable and it's scary and it's hard sometimes. But you have to take the responsibility for doing it. Nobody else can do that for you. And I know people who say, well, when I meet the perfect love interest, then I will trust them. Or when I find the perfect boss, I will trust that. And I'm like, there's no perfect. And anybody given enough opportunity is going to do something that's going to trigger an issue. Because that's why the issues are there, to get triggered. Because at one time they protected you. They don't anymore. You need to learn to do differently and perhaps better. And like I said, not going to lie, not easy. But get to therapy, start journaling, start doing mood boards, whatever it is you need to do to examine your past and pinpoint the places where these issues came from. And then once you find the root of the issue, dig it up, get rid of it, and start behaving differently. Like I said, knock down the walls, drain the moat, make purses out of the alligators. Be vulnerable, as hard and scary and sometimes annoying as that is. That's what you have to do. And finally, another tough one, trust yourself. This is, again, a hard one for me because for years and years, I made really bad choices. I made bad choices in relationships. I made bad choices in jobs. I made bad choices in how I treated myself and my health. I just made really bad choices. And I understand I made bad choices because I was damaged and I hadn't yet dealt with that damage. I get that. So I'm not beating myself up when I say I made really bad choices. I'm just saying I did. And one of the things that I had to learn is to trust myself. And the way that I did that was by doing the work to be different. This person that's here talking to you is a quantum leap from who I was when I was 20 or 30. I can't even explain to you how different. And yeah, this person here still carries some of the damage from the other people, but she's also learned a lot. And she's also gained an understanding, I guess, of the issues that are driving her and why she made the choices she made. And it's weird to talk about myself in the third person, but I do almost feel like that person back there was a totally different person than me. And I just realized this. actually a couple months ago, and it kind of shocked me, but it really made sense. When I was younger, people called me Chris. When I was in college, I decided, which is a while before I started making changes and learning, but I decided I wanted to be Christine. And I am militant about the fact that I do not want to be called any other version of my name but my full name. I want to be Christine. And it didn't occur to me why I was so militant about that until I realized the other name is for someone that I don't really feel like I am anymore, and I don't really want to be anymore. So I want to be called by the name that I feel is the person that's actually has some semblance of mental health and has some semblance of respect for herself. So, maybe you need to do that. Maybe you need to use a different version of your name. Maybe you're going to need to drop some people from your life. Maybe you're going to need to change the places you go or the things that you do. And that's fine. But trusting yourself is simultaneously the easiest and the hardest thing, I think, of all of this. Because if you have a history of poor choices, even if you understand why you made them, it's tough sometimes to believe that you can do it differently. But you can. It's a process like anything else, and you'll have to do the work, but you can do it and it can happen. And that, my friends, is our little talk on trust. And yes, this is good, Cindy. Cindy says it's like rebranding the same product for a fresh outlook. And that really is exactly what it's like. It was like, this is the 2.0 version and it needs a new name. So 2.0 is Christine. There you go. So if I decide to have a 3.0, I don't know what I'll call her, but maybe she'll be Christine still. Who knows? Because Christine I kind of like. But anyway, that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you listening to what I have to say. And I'll be back with another topic or a guest. Who knows? It's always kind of roulette here. Whatever happens, happens. But I hope you'll come back and join me because I appreciate you being here. And I will see you all next Wednesday.